Mark Cuban once said that sales should not be about convincing, but rather about solving a problem. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back. My name is Mike. I'm an aviator and recently a startup founder. Today, we're going to talk about problem. If you want to build a company or build a startup that will solve a problem or create a solution that's scalable, you need to find a problem, a real viable problem to solve for your market space. And today we're going to talk about the problem that I'm solving with AirMojo. Again, if you're new to the channel, I'm an aviator. I am knee deep in the aviation community, and the startup that I'm building called AirMojo, I want to solve problems within this space. I'm going to read from, I have my notes here because I want to give you some real life numbers so it makes more sense. So right now in the aviation space or the pilot community in the United States, for example, we have close to 700,000 pilots. When you think of that number, 700,000 is pretty high, right? But in relation to the actual population size of the US, which is over 300 million, that's like peanuts. So essentially, we need more pilots. At least personally, I would love for there to be more pilots. But here's where that number really makes sense. We have close to 700,000 pilots, but we only have a little over 200,000 aircraft registered. That's it. Right, so you take 700,000, 200,000, you can see the discrepancy there. To make the matters worse, most of those 700,000 pilots don't own, nor do they have access to the pool of 200,000 airplanes. As a matter of fact, what you generally see is you would have one pilot or one operator own multiple airplanes. I personally know somebody who owns more than 20 airplanes. And then you have others who either cannot afford to own an airplane, nor do they have access to an airplane. So that's the first picture I want to paint there. Look at the amount of pilots we have, and then look at the amount of airplanes available for those pilots. Okay, that's one. And then second is the 200,000 airplanes that we have available 99% of the time. Let me repeat, 99% of the time, those airplanes are not flying. They're just sitting on the ground somewhere and eating dust. That is the unfortunate fact. Even though we have just a small pool of aircraft or a small fleet of aircraft, most of those planes are not flying, particularly in the civil aviation world. Now, you do have some bigger aircraft within that pool, a very small fraction, like jets and turboprops, and maybe some bigger size piston engine airplanes that are used for commercial purposes, and generally those planes get to fly more regularly. But you move your attention into more of the civilian or civil aviation world, and you will see most of the fleet of airplanes available are just on the ground. As a matter of fact, the average amount of hours that a pilot and owner flies their airplane is 50 to 100 hours per year. 50 to 100. So if you do that math, if you calculate how many hours we have available in a year, it's over 8,000 hours. For most of the lifetime of an airplane, it's just sitting on the ground, which is unfortunate. As a matter of fact, airplanes love to fly. Just like anything mechanical, if you just leave them, they're gonna go bad. Rust is gonna happen. Engines that are not running are gonna go bad. That's been the case when it comes to maintenance for some folks. These are some of the problems, or at least the early problems that we're going to attack first. Is one, to be able to match airplanes to pilots and to keep our airplanes operating. Because guess what? The more an airplane flies, the less expensive it is, the cheaper it gets to fly, which brings me to my next problem. Right now, the cost of flying, whether you're an aircraft owner or you're just a pilot, is very expensive. On average, it will cost you about $200 an hour to fly, say, a 70-year-old Cessna 172. This is fact, especially if you're renting. So if you're renting or you're a student right now, depending on your city, at least the city where I'm based in Atlanta, it costs about $195 to rent a Cessna 172, and then you pay another $60, $70 per hour to hire a CFI. So ultimately you're spending $250 to $270 an hour to rent a 60, 70-year-old airplane. It's not efficient and it is expensive. Part of that problem is due to the fact that these airplanes are not running or being flown as often as they should be. Next problem is the fact that there's a pilot shortage. If you've been following the news for the last year or 2 years, you would know that we do have a pilot shortage, both for airline pilots, helicopters also, and the military has a pretty big hole right now in finding pilots. What do we do about this? One, obviously, we want to get more people interested in flying or educated about flying. But here's the part that perhaps the media or the general public don't know. We do need more pilots, but there are already pilots, certified pilots, or certified commercial pilots in the space right now that cannot get a job in the airlines. And that is due to the fact that they haven't met the hourly requirements. So for a lot of airlines, at least 2 years ago, today it might have changed, but for many years, you would need at least 1,500 hours, okay? 1,500 hours to be able to transition into airline or become an airline pilot. Now, if you look at the fact that the average pilot only flies 50 to 100 hours, think about the span of time it would take to make up 1,500 hours. So that's part of the problem, is the fact that you do have certified commercial pilots who need to build time. And again, we've already established that part of the problem is the cost of building time, or the cost to rent an airplane at a flight school is very expensive. Now you multiply, say a pilot needs 1,000 hours to make up. And if they're spending roughly $200, or let's even lower the amount. Let's put it at 150. If a pilot spends 150, okay, an hour, and they need 1,000 of those hours, you do the math. It's a lot of money. That's part of the problem that we will help solve. Is one, when we have more airplanes being operated and more airplanes flying rather than being on the ground, it drives the cost significantly down, which makes it cheaper and more affordable for not just new pilots or student pilots, but rather commercial pilots who need to build time. There are other problems that AirMojo will help solve, but these are the primary problems that we want to solve. The shortage of pilots, building time and making it more affordable for certified pilots and students, then also utilizing a fleet of airplanes that are available right now that are being underutilized. All of these things together is what we want to break down and solve. And then eventually, the bigger problems that we want to solve has to do with the airlines. If you guys try to fly somewhere during the pandemic, oftentimes you have flights that are canceled on you, things like that. But we'll talk about that in a future video. But again, just to document what I'm doing, these are the problems that I'm looking to solve. Depending on your market and the space that you're in, you need to understand what problems that you're creating a solution for. And again, I'm gonna end the video by repeating what I said in the beginning. When it comes to sales, it should not be about convincing somebody. Rather, it should be about solving a problem for them. So I imagine that once we put our solution out there, and again, this is for you, you want to make sure that you're actually creating a solution that people will want to buy, rather than trying to convince them to buy your product. Okay, I hope this video was of value to you. If it was, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if this is your first time. Again, my name is Mike, and I will catch you on the next video. Peace.